Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Adnistana. Just got back from a bicycle ride. In today's segment of Points of Light Radio, we're going to be studying the Brotherhood of American Yeomen. It was a co-educational North American fraternal organization that was organized in February of 1897 in Bancroft, Iowa. This should be interesting, okay? I love doing these historical segments, so let's move forward and study this organization.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
The Brotherhood of American Yeomen was a co-educational North American secret fraternal benefit society that was organized on February 25th, 1897 in, of all places, Bancroft, Iowa. Now, the organization based their ceremonies on Sir Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe and organized the order around homesteads. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, what does this remind you of any of the other defunct fraternal orders we've studied here on Points of Light Radio? Now, there was a strong Christian element in the rituals and ceremonies, which also these ceremonies also praised the Magna Carta as well as the English language. The order had a 1-degree initiation. Its ritual was based in the time of Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, and its ritual included signs, passwords, and obligations. At the King's Court, a candidate was initiated in the spirit of knighthood and the themes of the order, which were wisdom, charity, and protection. The Supreme Conclave was the governing body of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen. Now, officers in the Brotherhood of American Yeomen had titles such as Grand Foreman, which was essentially the Grand Master, the Chief Correspondent, which would have been the recording secretary, and the Grand Master of Accounts, which was probably your financial secretary. The lodges themselves, the primary lodges, were called homesteads. The supreme office of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen was known as the Castle. Its members, the members of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen, were called archers. Men and women were admitted on equal terms. There was also a juvenile division of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen that accepted children from ages 1 to 16. The Brotherhood of American Yeomen had chapters all across the United States as well as Canada, and in 1908, the organization had 26,203 members. And those numbers grew to 43,212 members by 2017. However, 1920, based on my research, appears to be the zenith of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen. Now, here's some very interesting statistics. By 1920, 2/3 of the active fraternal societies in the United States and Canada were older than the Brotherhood of American Yeomen. Statistics showed that 140 fraternal societies in 1920 were organized well before the Brotherhood of American Yeomen, and 68 came into existence after the inception of the Brotherhood of American Yeomen. Isn't that interesting? This is something we've talked about before, where, like you've heard me say, there were new fraternal orders and secret societies coming into existence on an almost, if not weekly basis, then monthly basis. And these are the ones that are basically around and still around in 1920, I might add, that you're hearing me talk about today. Now, by 1920, the Brotherhood of American Yeomen stood fifth. Isn't that amazing? Among all U.S. fraternal societies in membership, they had 285,948 benefit-paying members on this as of December 31st, 1920. In the first 4 months of 1921, the organization grew to 300,000 members. Isn't that amazing? In 1923, the Brotherhood of American Yeomen had 3,191 subordinate lodges or households, as you've heard me say before, 208,782 benefit, and 7,607 social and auxiliary members, while the juvenile department had 5,607 members. So it might be just me, but did their numbers actually drop? Do you get that feeling? In 1932, the organization was changed to the Yeoman Mutual Life Insurance Company. That was a mutual legal reserve and a level premium company that was later known as AmeriUS. I love studying these defunct fraternal orders because there's so much to be learned when you look at them, isn't there? The things that I noticed here, first of all, this is an organization, the Brotherhood of American Yeomen is an organization that whoever formed it was very determined, right? And got people around them that had that same level of determination to see this thing through, to see this organization move forward and prosper, right? A prime example of the determination was in 1918. The Americans went to war, Canadians went to war, shall we say, in 1914. Americans went to war in 1917. The First World War ended in 1918. And in that time, this organization, a lot of other organizations had trouble because they were largely male-dominated. This organization admitted both men and women, but let's face it, most of the members of these organizations would be men, and they'd be off fighting the war. The other thing is people were dying. The members would be dying in the war, right? As well as in the great influenza pandemic that followed it. Members were dying. Right? So these benefits that these organizations would have been paying out, if you remember from previous segments of Points of Light Radio, a lot of these organizations couldn't keep up with that. But this one did. The Brotherhood of American Yeomen not only found a way to grow, like to thrive, they grew right through the great influenza pandemic of 1918. They were still growing. Right? And as you've heard me say before, what is it about that year 1920? It was the zenith year for the Brotherhood of American Yeomen, as well as some other fraternal orders. Why could they not survive that? Right? Something we'll have to dig into a little deeper. But, I found it interesting that, by 1920, 2/3 of all active fraternal societies in the U.S. and Canada were older than the Brotherhood of American Yeomen, right? 68 had come into existence after the Brotherhood of American Yeomen were formed, right? There were so many new, as you've heard me say before, so many new fraternal orders in the late 1800s and even maybe up into the early 1900s being formed on an almost monthly basis. It was amazing. But this one managed to stand out and surpass all of them in some ways, right? The other thing that kind of, shall we say, has really struck me as I've studied the Brotherhood of American Yeomen is that they were formed, is the way they were formed, right? They were formed based around, a book and a play about Ivanhoe, right? You've heard me say this before. These organizations, these fraternal orders could be formed around almost anything. If you looked, the Knights of Pythias were formed after Justin Rothbone saw a play about Damon and Pythias, right? The Ben-Hur, the Society of Ben-Hur that you saw in a previous segment of Points of Light Radio was formed after someone read a book about Ben-Hur, right? It's interesting how, was it just me, right? Or did people seem to have much more, shall we say, creative minds in the 1800s without all these other forms of entertainment and distractions going on that, that would maybe cloud their minds? Maybe it's because back then they had, like I said, they didn't have those distractions, so their minds were much more open to create this kind of creative thinking, because that's just incredible, and I'll leave you with this. Have we lost some of that creativity, right, at this point in fraternal history? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could somehow recapture it? Let me know what you think, okay? Let me know what you think and how we could go about recapturing some of that creativity. Maybe it's a segment for a future, maybe it's a topic for a future segment of Points of Light Radio. As always, like I said, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I mean, I love studying these fraternal orders. It's just wonderful to really dig in and, see how things used to be done and maybe how we could improve things in the future, right? Before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. You can see the link to my PayPal account. You can hit on that link, make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. We will use that to move the podcast forward. You can see the link to my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. My Blue Sky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, until we meet again, just step into the light, and let's not be afraid to be creative.